Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 4 of season 3 of Supergirl, The Faithful. And all around, I thought this was a reasonably solid episode. There's a lot of interesting things happening with the characters. Um, and I also like that it deals with its subject matter in what I think is a very nice and intelligent way. So let's just kind of get right into things. The idea of people worshiping like Superman or Supergirl as like living gods is one that's been played around with in the comics before. In fact, we even saw it a little bit of it in the the last Superman, Batman versus Superman or Superman versus Batman, whatever. And this is an idea I've always found really, really interesting. Just sort of like, how would superheroes deal with this? Now, both Supergirl and Superman have always been extremely adamant with the, hey, no, 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 don't worship me. I'm not a god. Knock this off. Which, of course, is absolutely correct. But nonetheless, I just always sort of wish that the comics, or at least the stories that I read, would have played around with this a little bit more. Now, this is apparently like somewhat inspired by an old Supergirl story, probably written by Peter David, called Hero Worship. And I had this really vague memory of reading this story back when it first came out, back around 2000. I honestly can't remember the details, but it's certainly, like I said, an interesting idea. And the episode handles it, yeah, exactly the way it should. Kara is pretty freaked out by all of this, and the idea of these people, putting themselves and other people in danger in order to be saved by Supergirl is some sort of way of being anointed. It's really pretty creepy. Um, but I do like that the episode is not in any way, shape, or form used as a way of condemning religion or condemning faith. We see for a lot of people that this is something that is a source of comfort and stability in their life. And I myself am not a particularly religious person, but I can understand. I can understand that. Everyone looks around at the world sometimes and wonders, what does it all mean? Where does it all come from? Is there more to life than what I see here? And for some people, looking towards religion offers answers. And I certainly can't fault anybody for that. And the episode is very clear with the message that there's nothing wrong with religion. It's just when you do things that could potentially harm other people, that's when you're in the wrong. And even the minister guy, whose name escapes me at the moment, he's not really presented as a bad person. He's actually presented as a genuine good person, and that this cult that he started actually was kind of a positive thing for him. It really gave him something good in his life. It's really, again, only when he started advocating doing stuff that would put other people in danger that he went down the wrong path. Well, seriously down the wrong path. Worshipping Supergirl, not a wise idea in the first place, but still, it was basically kind of a, well, I don't know if I'd even say harmless, but he certainly wasn't actually hurting anyone. And it's interesting that, I mean, even by the end of the episode, even he sort of realizes that he took it too far. But it's a little unclear if just how much of what Kara has said to him has gotten through. But he seems to have at least learned his lesson. So even under these circumstances, his faith is not presented as a bad thing. It's perhaps an unwise choice. But as long as he's not hurting anyone, well, people have to be free to make poor decisions in their life. I was recently came across an interesting idea in, of all things, a game I was playing called Danganronpa V3, where one of the characters points out that if there's no such thing as lies, well, how does truth have any meaning? Which is a slightly different idea than what we're dealing with here, but it is an interesting question. If if people don't have this sort of thing in their life, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. There are plenty of people out there who are atheists and stuff who don't really need, or they choose not to go down that path. But it is an interesting contrast that some people can look around at the world and they find that, faith in a higher power, truth to them in many ways, is what they need to really feel complete, to feel connected to the greater whole of the universe, while other people just simply say that what I have within me is enough. Through my own power, I can find greater connection to that which is greater than myself. And that, I think, is quite an interesting thing. And it, like superheroes and religion is always an interesting thing. Like Daredevil, of course, being famed for his Catholic practices. The idea of like, well, how do heroes sort of view all of this? So I think I'm kind of going around in circles here, so maybe I should just sort of move on. Um, let's see here. One thing that I do wish they talked about in this episode, like especially after we see that little flashback to Krypton with Kara as a kid taking part in this religious ritual with her mother, is, well, how much of what she believed as a kid on Krypton has carried over into who Kara is now? Does she still maintain Kryptonian religious practices? Remember, this is something she would have grown up with. Kal-El, Clark, would have found out about these things as an adult. And one thing that I would see sometimes in the comics, especially like the older comics, like from the early '90s and stuff, was that Superman would sometimes go to the Fortress of Solitude and he would put on these Kryptonian-style clothes and he would speak to these robots that sort of took care of the place in the Kryptonian language, and he would read about Kryptonian history and culture and things like that as a way to kind of connect to his Kryptonian heritage. Because until he was genuinely an adult, he had absolutely zero connection to that. Kara, being raised till the time where she was around, I guess, 12 in that culture, that would have been a very ingrained part of her life. And I thought this was going to be a chance to really sort of get some insight into just how much of that particular aspect of culture, which, if Krypton is anything like Earth, where religion is very, very ingrained in culture, how much of that was something that Kara still held on to, and how much of it was a part of her life that we just really haven't seen and explored yet. And yeah, I was really disappointed that we didn't kind of get into that. But perhaps we'll see a little bit more of that down the road. Some really nice stuff with Samantha this episode. They're really doing a nice job of humanizing her and showing us and reminding us that parents aren't perfect people and that they do make mistakes, but most of them are always trying to do their best for their kids. And Lena gets some real serious points for sort of giving Samantha some much needed perspective when she was at a low point. Fun stuff with Maggie and Alex, sort of being aunts to Ruby. That was nice, although perhaps a little overly familiar because they don't really know Samantha super well. But okay, we'll let that go. But it is interesting that it looks like this whole "I don't want to have kids" thing is going to be a potential deal breaker between Alex and Maggie, just as it potentially might be in real life. Yeah, I would be very interested to see where things go with that, because that is an understandably a big issue, and you can hardly fault someone for choosing to have children or choosing to not have children. It's probably one of the greatest and most personal choices we ever make in our life. And there is no right or wrong answer. There is only what is right or wrong for an individual. But, if you're going to be part of a couple, that's one thing that you pretty much have to be on the same page on. And if you're not, well, I can't really fault that for being a deal breaker. So we'll have to see. And, oh yeah, some nice stuff with Jimmy this episode. I mean, the story about how he first met Clark and his own, kind of remarks about faith are nice there. Although it does stray a little bit, I think, into the whole old and completely false saying that there are no atheists in foxholes. But still, under the circumstances, I can hardly begrudge Jimmy his perspective on that one. Anyway, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.